We're live. Hello. Sorry. Still tuning. New at this game. G'day everyone out there in here. Hello. People are too busy talking. They haven't seen other people for a very long time. It's so good to be able to be in a room with other people and to be able to sing and just encourage one another in the flesh and face to face. It's so great. And to everyone at home is watching as well, a very warm welcome as well. And we hope to be able to see you here soon. And then also, all things being equal, we'll hope to be able to see everyone all together in the one spot. We'll just kick off with a quick song, and then Lex will come up and say a few words. Don't have the words. Maybe do you want to just flip that screen around so at least people have got some words? No, I've got words here. It's all good. Oh, they're back up. Here we go. Just pretend like nothing happened.
Walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. Nothing to fear now, for I am safe. When I fight, I'll fight on my knees, my hands lifted high. Oh God, battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? Jesus, there's nothing impossible. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is a cross, you see the empty. When I fight, I'll fight on my knees, my hands lifted high. Oh God, battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, battle belongs to you. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. When I fight, I'll fight on my knees, my head lifted high.
for a sec. Fantastic just to be gathered again. Great to have all the kids here. We've got a brand new jumping castle thing out there. Justin, won't that be fantastic, eh? Just specially for you. It's bulletproof. You can't destroy it, right? Luke, you can't even wreck it. You can't. I dare you, I double dare you to have a go at wrecking. No? Just treat it nicely. Be really good. Okay. All those online, great to have you with us this morning. Those in South Australia, Queensland. I love the fact that Byron in New Zealand, last week he's watching this and then he texts his brother, Andy, and says, hey, Andy, you got to watch what's happening with Redgum today. And I just love the fact that we go so much wider than what's in this room. It's actually hard to even appreciate how far-reaching what we're doing is. And so just welcome to everyone online, all those locally, those at the cafe, down the Old Station Cafe, great to have you with us this morning too. Fantastic. Now, just a little bit of news. We're in the process of trying to find a permanent venue for Redgum. And we've approached a landlord in Main Street and we're getting positive responses there. But no matter how quickly we sign a contract and how quickly we do all this stuff, it's still going to take 6 months because we have this wonderful organisation called the Shire of Bairnsdale. and they like us to go through all the right channels, and so there's a process. So even if this venue becomes ours, there's still going to be 6 months where we're not having a building. And so really appreciate your prayer, ideas, if you've got suggestions, if you've got a really big tent somewhere, just anything, right? So that's just an update of where we are, and I'll get to talk again in a few minutes when you guys finish doing your bit, right? Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
Hey.
Thanks, Lex. Let's stand again and sing.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul from the freedom is all that I know. The old made new till I met you. You called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen.
isn't it great to know that we worship the God, the one true God, and nothing is greater, no one is stronger. God is higher than any other. Just, amen, hey? Please be seated.
It's actually really weird being in here today because a zillion billion years ago, what's now Riviera Church, we used to meet in here, right? And in fact, in this very building, my brother Jeff and I got into a boxing ring that was set up in here, and wearing nothing but boxing gloves and a pair of shorts, we went toe-to-toe for 3 rounds in this building, right? And it was part of a drama, and it was meant to be, Jeff was meant to represent Jesus, and I was Satan. Like, I know you're thinking I was typecast unfairly, I get that, right? But I was actually told that if I took on the role of Jesus, no one would believe the drama, so I sort of got stuck with the Satan role, right? Now, I don't know about you at school, but have you ever been in a situation in your life when you and your friends got the giggles when you're meant to be quiet? When it's a serious situation, Jeanette's getting a little giggle on her face already. And so you're in this situation where you sort of, something seems funny, but everyone around you is serious and you're not meant to be laughing, and you're sort of just sharing it with your friends, and it's this little giggle that's going before it, and you're smiling and you're trying to keep your mouth shut, and then the worst thing happens. You really lock eyes with your friend and they look at you and you can't keep it anymore, and just it bursts out, right? And it's one of those moments where laughter is a really contagious thing that you're sharing with each other. But 100 years ago, actually more than that, probably 3,000 years ago, Solomon wrote these words, and he said, there's a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance. Now, Solomon was meant to be one of the wisest men that ever lived. But surely a smart man could come up with something better than that. Like, it's fairly obvious that there's a time to cry and a time to laugh. There's a time when you're not meant to be laughing and you get the giggles up, right? There's like, if we go to a funeral, it's a time to cry. If we're at a wedding, it's a time to dance. If we are sad, like there are these times we grieve, that we laugh at things that are funny. And Solomon is telling us something that seems obvious. It just seems so obvious. Anyone would know that. Anyone would understand there's these different times. But I actually believe that our culture, the world we live in, our communities actually get very confused over these 18 words. Now, I want to deal with the last 9 words first. I want to just talk about it briefly, get it aside, put it out of the road, and then deal with a time to cry and a time to laugh. So the first thing I'm going to deal with is a time to grieve and a time to dance. Now, for many this year, it's been a year of loss. There are people that are coming near the end of this year and are grieving over things that didn't happen, opportunities that you've missed, things that you couldn't do with families, moments that you couldn't share with other people. For some of you, you're grieving a loss of someone that's died, a loved one that's no longer here. And this is going to be the first Christmas that you're celebrating without them around. And you're feeling torn between this time to dance, to celebrate, and still feeling the grief, the loss that you've been carrying through the year. And some of you are actually not looking forward to Christmas. Now, Solomon wasn't talking about dancing like in a nightclub, or as Jan reminds me, when she was younger, in this very building, she used to come to dance nights. And there were dancers in this building. But that's not the sort of dancing that Solomon's talking about. He's talking about this a physical expression of something that's happening. When you haven't seen someone for a long time and you see them and you hug or you shake hands or there's just this smile exchanged, it's physical, what you're feeling on the inside. It's the dance of a child. It's the running when you could walk. We've got a little 2.5-year-old granddaughter, Remy. She runs everywhere. It's just an expression of what she feels inside in her little body. It's the joy of a child wriggling and sort of can't keep still when they're unwrapping a Christmas present. Our daughter Mandy, when she was little, she had to fake that sort of excitement because every Christmas she would actually search the house prior to Christmas Day. She would find whatever we were going to give her. She would open it up, look at it, because she's so impatient, then wrap it back up again. Yep, that's it, wrap it back up again, put it under the tree, or leave it where it was, and then we would put it under the tree, and she would then fake this excitement, right? But God wants you to know that even if it's just for the sake of the kids, there's a time to dance. There's a time to grieve, but sometimes, even just for the sake of other people, laying down the grief and dancing, it's a time to gather. It's a time to celebrate life together. It's don't let your grief and don't let your loss, don't let COVID rob us of gathering together, of being able to be together, of dancing. The joy of seeing people this morning was just so good to see some people we haven't seen your face for a long time. Andy, you've improved in your looks. You look so much more handsome than I remembered you. No. I won't tell you how I remembered you, but you just look better than I imagined you to be. So take that for what it's worth, right? Years ago, in this same very venue, we actually as a church put on a bush dance. We also put on a bush dance in another similar building called the Wyong Hall. And we did that when we had a new pastor and his wife and family coming to Bairnsdale. We wanted to welcome with a bush dance. And just like Tony, who loves to cook these beautiful cakes for Redgum these days, I just love those cakes you're making, Tony, but I thought I would cook something. I'd make something that people could share. Lamingtons. Can't get anything better than lamingtons at a bush dance. And so I made these lamingtons, but I wanted them to be a little bit different, a little special. I made them out of foam rubber. Yellow foam rubber, right? And I cut them in little squares, right, like lamingtons should look, and I dunked them in icing, chocolate icing, and put all the coconut on them, put them on the plate. They looked and felt the weight of a lamington. They were just brilliant. And I can remember this old bloke in the church grabbing one and going and sitting on this bench, sort of seat on the outside of the building, and he's just chewing, he's trying to chew into this, and he's just going like this. And then I watched him, and I overheard what he said. He says, my false teeth aren't working. My false teeth aren't working. And he grabbed it, and he chucked it under the seat, just very gently, just dropped it on the floor, right? That night, I did that for laughter, and we laughed that night. But 10 years later, when Barry and Margaret Clark left Bairnsdale, we cried because they were such beautiful people, and the loss of them we really felt. And there's a time to cry and there's a time to laugh. Now, in our gatherings as a family, if you were to pick one word to describe what happens when the Raymonds get together, laughter. Well, yeah, loud laughter. You've got to be loud to outbeat everyone else in the room. And so laughter is like, it's just when we get together, it's laughter. But there's also crying. And I remember one Christmas, we're out at Jeff and Kath's and everyone was laughing. We're having this fantastic time. And Dad gave me this sort of a handwritten document, pages and pages and pages on the history of my ancestors, the stories of all those people that had gone before me. And I just was so overwhelmed with this. I loved it, and I started opening it up. And I read something about on my grandmother's side where this letter was written, and it was written on the Western Front in World War I, and this young soldier's writing to his mum and dad and saying, "Mum and Dad, I want to honour you for being the mum and dad that you've been to me," he said, "because I'm about to go into a battle that I could die in." He did. He died that day. But he wrote this appreciation. And I'm reading this, and everyone else is laughing. And I'm crying away on the couch because it really got me. And there is a time to cry, and there's a time to laugh. And like growing up, I decided there are two things about my dad that I knew for certain. He had no taste buds, and he had no sense of humour. And like I remember one night we're sitting there, and Mum wasn't really a great cook. She did her best, but she wasn't a great cook. And she burnt the custard. And it was really obviously burnt. In those days, fire stove, you cook custard milk and cook custard. And I could hardly eat it. And Dad's going, "Oh, Beth, I love this caramel flavour that you've added to the oh, this is really..." I'm thinking, "Dad, you have no taste buds." But I realised later, he so loved Mum, it was his way of appreciating. He wouldn't find fault. I was finding fault, but Dad wasn't. But I just knew that Dad had no sense of humour. But I would love you to go online and type in Redgum Church on YouTube and find some preaching that Dad... It's from a DVD that we played about November of last year. Just go on YouTube Church and even put the word David in, David Raymond. And it's Dad, and he's preaching to over 500 people in a Church of Christ in Berwick, my brother's church down there. He's so funny. He's got so much to say. He's completely paralysed from a stroke on one side, and it's impossible for him to preach. He has no voice, and he stands up and he shares some of the stories of life, what God has done in his life. If you haven't seen it, I'd really recommend you go and have a look. If you've seen it, watch it again. But watch it through the eyes of someone that I believed had no sense of humour. And I want you to watch what he is like, because at Dad's funeral, we cried. But we gave out these DVDs of Dad's preaching to every single person. And I know that everyone that's ever watched this has laughed, but been impacted and encouraged by Dad's life. I know that our culture is confused over laughing when they should be crying and crying over when they should be laughing, and I'll explain it to you. If you think of stand-up comedians when they're doing a live gig, their job is to get people to laugh. Now, the language that they will use, if you heard, say, a Year 7 student using that to their teacher, you would think that's not right. You would think the school shouldn't tolerate that. I don't know a parent that gets their 3-year-old in front of them and says, "Now listen, this is how you say the F word. I'm going to spell it for you, and I want you to use it wherever you go because you'll get laughs from it." But that's the culture of our comedians. Now, the fact that they use that language is probably really not that big a deal compared to the subject matter, what they will get people laughing at. It can be crude. It can put people down. The laugh comes from putting down another human being and making them look stupid so we can all have a laugh. And I don't think that Jesus would actually get confused about how to respond in those moments. That sort of humour cheapens sex. It takes something precious as God's given and just makes it very common. And it does not help objectifying any human being, whether it's a woman or a man. And I just think that Jesus would not get confused in how to respond, but I think sometimes our culture does. In fact, I was just watching something on the TV the other night, last week, and I've never seen this. It was an ad, and it was something to do with respecting women. And on this ad, people who are probably not Jesus followers made this ad, and this is what they said: "Don't laugh at jokes that disrespect women." That's a pushback from our own culture against our own culture. And if people far from God can see that, how about us as God's kids? Let us not get confused. Like, let's not laugh at what someone puts someone else down. Like, let's not laugh at stuff that's crude or share it with anyone. Let's not get confused, because I know years ago there's a little wristband and it had WWJD. What would Jesus do? And I just don't think he would be confused in how to respond. The joy of laughter, it comes from God's heart. It's God's heart, this joy of laughter. And I want you to like me. I really do. I want you to think good things of me, because we're created as relational beings. We're not meant to feel and experience rejection. That's not the way God wired us. And we have this capacity to make choices. Now, you might be single by choice, but it's probably someone else's choice, right? I'm not looking at you, Mitch. I'm just not. Hey, Mitch, I've got a phone number of someone you need to have a chat with. Yeah. Our awkward moment for Mitch. Sorry, Mitch. Yeah. Our ability to laugh, our sense of humour, it comes from God. And every choice we make is not always a good choice. God gives us the ability to choose, but we don't always make good choices. And God gives us the ability to laugh. But sometimes when we're laughing, it's not actually good medicine. There was a sound coming out of Israel's camp. There was a sound of laughter. There was a sound of singing. There was a sound of dancing. And Israel should not have been laughing and dancing at this time. They should have really been grieving at what was happening in the camp. See, Moses had been up on the mountain getting the big 10 from God. And as they're coming back, Moses and Joshua, they hear this sound coming out from Israel's camp. And what had happened was the people had got tired of waiting for Moses to come back. So they'd gone to his brother Aaron and they'd said, "Can you make us a God that we can put our hope in?" See, when God is silent, it's amazing how quickly we go to something else to put our hope in. We go to technology. We go to Dr. Google to find our hope. We search stuff on the internet, and we look at something, and what happens is, in my phone, there is these little men. And if I do a search of something, these little men run all around the world and they gather all the sort of stuff that says exactly the same as what I've just read, and they feed it to me. And I start to feel like everyone else in the world thinks exactly like I'm looking for. Paul says our ears get itchy. We want them tickled. We want to hear things that fit what we believe. We're looking for the sympathy that someone will give us. And we use technology to do that. Now, with Israel, they had really poor internet reception in the desert in those days, right? Really poor. In fact, they couldn't use that technology. So what they did was Aaron passed around the hat, a bucket, and he got everyone to take their little earrings out and drop them in the bucket, and they were made of gold. And they melted them down, and then Aaron, with this melted down gold, made a golden calf. And he took these engraving tools and he made this calf. He used the highest technology they had in the desert, which was the engraving tools, and they made a calf. Now they had something to put their hope in. And now they're laughing and they're dancing and there's noise in the camp. And in Isaiah 49, God says these words, "Those who hope in me will not be disappointed." Anything else we put our hope in life ultimately will let us down. We won't get what we wanted. And Moses knows this. And so when he arrives in the camp, he's cranky at his brother. He's really ticked off at his brother Aaron. And I want you to listen to Aaron's excuse for why he did what he did. He blamed Moses for being away. And then he blamed the people. And he says, but all I did was pass the bucket round. I just took up an offering. Can't be anything wrong with taking up an offering. And then I threw these little gold things into the fire. And Moses, you wouldn't believe it. This calf just popped out of the fire. And if you think I'm making that up, read the story, right? Aaron goes, Moses, I could hear this moo, moo. There's a whole herd of cows in the fire. And I thought the whole lot would come out, but just a little calf. He's so cute. We sort of adopted him and everyone sort of liked this little calf, Moses. And Aaron is meant to be the one that hears from God and tells the people what God's saying. He's Moses' second in command, and what coming out of his mouth is rubbish. It's amazing when we don't listen to God what we will believe of what's going on in our head. It was a time to be crying. That's Aaron's response. But he did something that created laughter and dance in the camp. That was the moment when Aaron should have said, Moses, you're right. I blew it. I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry. But it just jumped out of the fire. I think that's probably the funniest line I've ever read in the Bible. It's just ridiculous, right? I just want you to jump forward with me 1,000 years in the history of Israel. And Jerusalem, the walls had been broken down for 150 years. And then in 52 days, Nehemiah, with God's favour upon him, has rebuilt the walls. And Ezra the priest, he has re-established temple worship in the temple. And it's a time to celebrate. And they gather all the people together and they crack open the Bible and they start reading from the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, and they start reading it to people. They set up a big PA system, and from early morning till lunchtime, they read the Bible. Now, what they're reading is a covenant with Israel of blessings and curses. And the people are hearing this, and it starts to grieve them, and they start to cry because they realised they have not kept up their part of the covenant. They've let down what they were responsible for. They've done the wrong thing. And there is a time to cry. There is a time to grieve. There's a time to regret what we've done. There's a time to feel loss. But the trouble is, Israel is meant to take those emotions. We're to take those emotions to God and be healed and be set free. And this thing no longer have a hold over us. And Israel is now stuck in shame and guilt and regret. And right in front of them are the brand new walls. And they can't see them. They can't see God's favour upon them because they're so focused and looking back at the past, at what's happened in 2001, 2021, whatever year it is, they're looking back. Right there in front of them is the evidence of God's favour. And Nehemiah and Ezra and the whole leadership team said to them, no, you got it wrong. This is a time to dance. It's a time to celebrate. It's a time to laugh. And this is what they told them. They said, go find some really calorie-loaded food and some drink with lots of sugar. That's what it says. Go and find this rich food and find all this stuff and party. It's time to celebrate. And he said, and I want you also to take some of what you make and prepare and share it to people that have nothing. See, when we cry, when we grieve, it's all inward, isn't it? We're looking at us. We're focused introspectively. But when we laugh, it frees us to think of others, to share what we have with others. And that's what they told them to do. They said, don't grieve, don't focus on yourself. We want you to laugh and celebrate and grab the offering, grab the 10%, grab the tithe and use it as party money. Spend it. Imagine every Sunday we took up an offering and then we're going down to Macca's afterwards or KFC. Come on, everyone, we're just going to have a feed, you know. That's literally what they did. And Nehemiah says to them, this day is holy to the Lord. He says, do not grieve for, and here's a line that some of you will have heard. For the joy of the Lord is your strength. That's where that comes from. They were grieving, and Nehemiah says, nah, wrong move. There's a moment, there's a time for that, but now it's a time to laugh. The joy of the Lord is your strength. We shifted to Donald when I was about in year 8. And I never really liked high school. And it's probably because I mucked around too much. And teachers compared me with my siblings that did really well. Teachers can be cruel. And so I didn't like school much, and I usually got there late. But I remember waking up one morning and thinking, I'm going to really try harder at school, and I'm going to get there early today. And where our house was in Donald, it was on one side of the main street. We weren't far from the main street. And on the other side of the main street, quite a long way away, was the high school. So I got dressed up, got my little uniform on, put my little grey shorts on and put my little tie on. I hated school uniforms. But I put my little uniform on and I got on my bike and I rode to school early. First time I'd ever done it. I was amazed when you get to school early, no one's there. There's just this bloke was mowing the school oval and that was about it. And I waited and you know when you wait a little bit too long? And I'm thinking, something's wrong here. So I went over to the guy that was on the tractor mowing the school lawns and said, where is everyone today? And he looked at me and said, it's Saturday. It's Saturday, mate. There's no school on Saturdays. That wasn't the worst bit. I had to then turn around and ride back through the main street of town Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Everyone's looking at this idiot on a bike in a school uniform. Everyone knows there's no school on Saturdays. If we can laugh at ourselves, we can forgive ourselves. Sometimes we'll allow God to forgive us, but we struggle in letting us forgive us. But if we can laugh at ourselves, we'll forgive ourselves. And if we forgive ourselves, the enemy has nothing to accuse us over. And if we can forgive ourselves, we can forgive others. And we have nothing to hold against them either. Forgiveness is such a powerful, powerful thing. But here's the problem. No matter how much you're convinced that laughter is good for you, no matter how much you would like to laugh, if you really want laughter in your life, if you want laughter to come into your life, here's the problem. You're going to ask this question. You're going to ask yourself, how do I get this? How do I get this? And I was thinking about that question this week, and I realised it's the wrong question. The right question is, how did I lose it? How did I lose the laughter that I was born with as a little child, as a little brand new baby? How did I lose that laughter? I could give you the statistics, but the numbers don't really matter. The truth is that little children, when they're 4-year-old, laugh a whole lot more than a 40-year-old does. What happened? Where did that go? That's where that little saying, grumpy old men, comes from, doesn't it? Because people have noticed that some people just get grumpier as they get older. So where did it go? Like, I don't know your story. We all have different families of origins. We all have different things that have happened, traumas that have happened in our life. But through life, stuff happens and we just get robbed of what God put in us originally. And so how do we get that back, and how do we not lose it if we don't know how it went? And the only way to know how it went, if you don't know, is to ask God. And even if you know what's happened to you and why it's gone, ask him to heal you. Ask him to set you free, because that's what God does. And I talked about my dad earlier. My dad, honestly, when I was 16, had no sense of humour, especially with everything I did. He saw nothing funny in what I did. But when Dad finished life, he would laugh so loud in family gatherings that he would start coughing and couldn't even breathe. The tears would roll down his face. And he finished life completely different to how he started. How is that possible? How did the laughter come? It's what God did in his life, how God softened him. Even right now today, 2 of Dad's sisters, they're ancient. Hi Auntie Lily, hi Auntie Shirley. They'll be watching this in Queensland. They know what I'm saying is true. And that's why I want you to listen and have a watch of that DVD of Dad's preaching. That's a man that's been changed by the power of God. And that's available for every one of us. There's no exceptions. I want to finish with this thought. In Proverbs 31, there's a woman who is described in Proverbs 31 as a woman who trusts God. And there's a verse in Proverbs 31, verse 25, it says this: strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. Most of us have stories from the past we can laugh at. Some of us can even laugh while things are happening around us. But fewer are able to laugh at an uncertain future of things that we don't know. And the only way you can do that is to have the joy of the Lord. The laughter has got to come from God. It's got to be a God perspective, a way of trusting God into the future. There is a time to cry, and there is a time to laugh. And you'll only ever get those right if you allow God to heal the past, to trust him in the present, and to believe that God's favour is going to go with you into the future. Let's pray. God, I thank you for everyone gathered in here today. I thank you for all those online. I thank you, Father, that it's only your words, not mine, not my stories, not my insights. It's only your truth. It's only your word that changes any of us. It changed my dad. It's changed me. It's changed so many people in this room that are hearing this. It's available for everyone. And if you don't know who Jesus is, he's come to set you free. That's who he is. And so I would really encourage you that, I don't normally say this, but if today has been helpful, share it. If you're hearing this online, share it, because God's truth has the capacity to set people free. And I'm in a privileged position where I get feedback from people all over the place of what God's truths is doing and how it's changing lives. And so let's just be generous and let's just share. If this has helped you, share it with someone else. Thanks. We'll see you back here next week in Lucknow Hall. And for those online, we'll catch you the same way. See ya.